Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Into the final week of April. Geez, can we slow down time just a little bit? Although I would like some warmer weather in the process, please. But you know how I am. There's no way I want to rush time or wish it away, as those days will be here before you know it. What's here now is the latest edition with all that's happening in the world of sports, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And I'm in a bit of a cranky mood this afternoon. And yes, recording a little bit late here today, but nevertheless, got a lot to unpack. And I got to start off with what happened last night in Boston. Because if the Celtics need a wake-up call by any stretch of the imagination to know that the opponent that they're playing, and granted, 23 three-pointers is probably not going to happen again by the Miami Heat, but they've seen this movie, they've read this book, they've been down this road before with this team. As Bill Simmons eloquently puts it, these are the zombie Heat. You have to strike them in the head, in the heart, cut the legs off, the body, etc. in order for this team to die. They've only seen them now for the fourth time in the last 5 years. And after what took place last night, I get it. 23 threes, you're probably not going to see that for decades, or at least years, for any team to make that many three-pointers. And people could say, well, JAYREELZ, the Celtics hit 22 in game number 1 on Sunday. And yes, that may be a bit of an anomaly too. But if they haven't recognized that the opponent across the way is not going to go anywhere, despite the fact that they don't have their best player in a one Jimmy Butler, despite the fact that this team, as they've seen over the course of the last few years, and let's just even take it back to last year, because we can only put it under the umbrella of this coach, Joe Mazzulla, the head coach of the Celtics. If he does not get his team right, if he does not get his team straight, and they played great for a half. They were up by 3 at the half yesterday, and knowing that Jason Tatum got off to a great start in that first quarter, and Jaylen Brown played great, but Kristaps Porzingis, and I'm going to get to him more in a minute, and even to a certain extent, not to say Jrue Holiday has to be the guy that also has to score. We know he's there to defend and be that glue guy. But this team, for whatever the reason, and speaking of defense, what happened there on the perimeter yesterday where you had guys like Jaime Jaquez, the rookie, making threes. Do I even need to get into Caleb Martin again? If you've listened to this podcast, all you got to do is go back to the archives a year ago, how this guy all of a sudden is going to be enshrined with a gold jacket in the Hall of Fame based on the way the Celtics play this guy. And for him to put up, 24 points, he had 5 threes, and Tyler Hero, he had a huge game. The Celtics think that because they're a 1 seed and they won 64 games in the regular season and they should just have a red carpet to the NBA Finals, they are sadly mistaken. And people could say, well, JAYREELZ, they're an 8 seed. Don't worry, they're going to take care of them. One more time, I've seen this movie before. This is going to be a 7-game series. And I even said this on Monday. This should be no more than a 6-game series. As it is, it's going to be 6 automatic because you know there's going to be a split down in Miami. And can you trust the Celtics in their building? As we've seen there, going back to last year, how they can't even win games, whether losing to Golden State in a Game 4 2 years ago, when they were up 2-1, losing a Game 6 in their building, where the Warriors won their, you would think, in the Steph Curry era, their final championship. Last year, do I even need to go there as far as how they performed at the TD Garden throughout the course of the postseason? It's really a flat-out disaster. So now let me get to the particulars here. The first one has to be Kristaps Porzingis. I said this when they made the trade last year. We know that when he's healthy, and I know that's a big if, but when he's healthy, he's a guy that averages 23 and 8 in his sleep. But I've said it then, and I'm going to say it now. What is in his chest? What is in his heart? Because last night, that was an embarrassment. He played awful. And I'm not trying to say that this is the guy that's going to be the savior of this team, but as that third option, as a guy that also is going to need to contribute. And yes, we understand that he's going to play decent defense, but we get that the Heat and Eric Spoelstra, they said, we're going to try to play the Celtics at their own game. Game one was a bit of a slog for them because they had to win a play-in game, 32, 33 hours prior to that. So, of course, they came out flat. But now that they had 3 days, in essence, to prepare for the game last night, and they said, this is how we're going to do it. They're going to live and die by the three. We're going to try to come out that way. And what happened? And mind you, they only won by 10 points. So it wasn't as if they blew them out of the building. But in essence, the Celtics, who only lost 4 games in their building throughout the course of the year, that was a blowout. So Porzingis, number one. Number two, this team overall, they're a front-running ball club. Because all of their wins this year and the way they dominated and blew out opponents, and I get it, you had a lot of Charlottes and San Antonios and a lot of these bad teams, the Wizards, I get it. Not everybody's going to be a top-flight team coming into their building. But for whatever the reason, it's almost as if this team does not know how to win in crunch time. And yes, there are examples. I get it that last year, Derek White did putback in Game 6 down in Miami. And a lot of other games where they've had to pull themselves out for the fire. In particular, Jason Tatum, the 46-point game in Milwaukee in the Game 6 last year, where he shot one for forever until the fourth quarter in Game 6 against Philadelphia, down in Philly, and saved them from elimination. It's weird with this team because they're so bipolar. Because 1 minute they look like, they could gut out series, they could gut out games, but then when you think that they're going to win and it's going to be a breeze, they don't even know how to play basketball. They can't dribble, they can't shoot, they take terrible shots, they shoot with 5 seconds, or I should say 5 seconds into the 24-second shot clock, and it's just a disaster. And don't mind the blower outside, it's someone outside of my apartment just cleaning, so of course, my apologies for that. But this is now going to be a scenario where the Celtics, you're going to really see what they're made of here. And I'm going to come out and say this. This is going to be maybe a not so bold prediction considering. But if the Celtics do not win this series by whatever reason, and I don't care if they lose in 50 overtimes in Game 7. If they don't win this series, Joe Mazzulla's getting fired. You cannot by any stretch 64 wins and have the 1 seed. And we saw this last year. I get it with the Heat beating the 1-seeded Bucks in a scenario where Giannis was out for 2.5 games. I've said this 1,000 times here on the podcast. But you have to look at it as it is. They're not going to fire Brad Stevens. People could talk about, we need to break up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Obviously, Jaylen Brown's not going anywhere, and Tatum's going to get a contract that's even more than what Jaylen Brown got last year. Are you going to trade Tatum away? You're not going to get back what you think you'd get back in a trade, despite the fact that he's right in the middle of his prime. But that's not going to happen. The coach is going to be the fall guy. And then who are you going to bring in to be that guy that's going to be at the helm of this organization moving forward after it just would be an absolute disaster of a first round? It really would be. This would be worse than the Bruins last year, up 3-1 with all their regular season prowess, losing to the Panthers the way they did in overtime, I might add, in the first round. Do I kind of see this shaping up to be that type of series? Now, let me find out if the Celtics go up 3-1, and that would be typical. Watch them win the 2 games in Miami. They blow a Game 5 in their building, go back to Miami, and then it's another Game 7 scenario like we saw last year when the Celtics were down 0-3. They came all the way back, and then Tatum tweaked his ankle, and then the game was over from that point on. I tell you, as the vacuum out there is just getting closer, and this is a microcosm. What's happening outside is what's happening to the Celtics. And I understand it's just 2 games. I get it that you can't get crazy right now if you're a Celtic fan, and I know I am. You know why? Because I don't trust this team. I have zero trust with this club, with the top 2 players. Obviously, the coach is a big, giant question mark in big spots. And I said it a few days ago, and I'll still say it now. To me, this was the matchup that the Celtics, I get it, the fans probably didn't want, but I think they need it because this is where you're going to see whatever grit and toughness that they have, which right now is minimal, and for them to really look at this postseason, to look at their opponent, to not have a cakewalk, to not have like I said, a red carpet to get to a final, To me, this was the litmus test to see whether or not they were going to be ready for this. They showed that in game one. To me, that was more of an indictment on the Heat playing Friday night with the quick turnaround. And then now here you go, 3 days later with rest. And yes, 23 3-pointers, I understand. But again, this Miami Heat team is not afraid of the Celtics. You think that in any way, shape, or form they're shaking in their boots when they see the green and white? Not a chance. And then lastly, and I'll say this, for whatever, like I mentioned, whatever that they have in their gut, in their chest, or as I like to say, the testicular fortitude, Jimmy Butler put out a tweet last night. I don't know if you saw it, but he put his face over Jaylen Brown's body, where if you recall, last year when the Celtics were down 0-3 in that Eastern Conference Final, where he came out and said, don't let us get one. And they got 3 before losing in Game 7. And now Jimmy Butler wants to troll the Celtics and the Celtic fans to say, all right, we got one, or don't let us get one, and with his mug on Jaylen Brown's body. If that's not going to get your juices flowing, if that's not going to put a burn or a pit in your stomach to the point where it's like Saturday at 6 p.m., can't come any faster, then you know what? Just pack up and go on vacation right now. That's it. Just forget about the rest of the series. Forget about all of the accomplishments that you had in the regular season, the best record in the NBA, top seed in the conference. Just forget it. Just punt it away. In fact, when you get down to South Beach, just party like if it was 1999, like Prince once said back in the 80s. 2 games. I get it. Now it's a best of 5 with the Heat having the home court. But one more time before I pivot. Do you really trust this Celtic team? And I'll leave it at that. Now, as I look at some of the other series, I know there was controversy surrounding both the Sixers and Knicks games Sixers-Knicks, excuse me, and then you had Lakers with the Nuggets there on Monday night, and they had pivotal games tonight because obviously if they lose, either one of those teams, Sixers or Lakers, if they lose tonight, they're going to be done. And as it is, they may be done because of what happened there in the Knicks game. I get it that the 2-minute report showed that there were a couple of fouls there, and even Nick Nurse did try to call a timeout, which was overlooked there. And I don't want to hear that, the building was loud or it was crazy with everything that was unfolding. Could Kyle Lowry have a better inbounds pass? Let's start there. And I get it that there was a lot going on there. He was under the basket. He was trying to get the ball in. But, of course, he could have called a timeout. And I know Nick Nurse tried to do so as well. But it's not as if Lowry was a rookie or a second-year player that didn't know what to do at that point. He should have had the wherewithal to at least get a better inbounds pass or even look to the bench and say, let's call a timeout here and regroup to see what they could do. But as you saw, you had a mystery pointer at first, an offensive rebound by Isaiah Hartenstein, kicked out to Dante DiVincenzo. And what does he do? Drains a 3. Knicks take the lead. Knicks win the game. I know Joel Embiid in the postgame wants to hang his head and talk about how the series isn't over, we're going to come back, so on and so forth. And I get it, he's ejected, but how can you address the media with your head down and just like looking into the floor with your hands over your head? I mean, please. I can't take Embiid seriously from that point. And I get it that he's bitter and it was just disgusting for him to not get those calls there at the end of the game. But this Sixer team, as we know, dating back to when they had the process in full bloom, where they had Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, even Jahlil Okafor for that matter, and they weren't able to do a thing. And right now, they are staring at an 0-2 deficit to where if they don't win the night, and even if they do win the night, I still think they could get back in the series. But when we take a look at the big picture in the grand scheme of things, the Knicks, although it's been mano a mano and it could have gone either way, but they're going to be the team I think is going to come out of the series. They have a lot more guts. They have a lot more intestinal fortitude. They've been able to get contributions from players that you wouldn't even imagine at the start of this season, let alone this series. And they've been the team that has gotten the 50-50 balls. They've gotten the rebounds. They've made big shots, and the Sixers haven't done that. And that's what you got there with this series. What's going to happen tonight? I think the Sixers will come back. They've had a couple of days to let this sit. I'm sure it's festering inside, and maybe with their home court rallying around their Sixer franchise and their team, that they will go ahead and win a game before a pivotal game 4, which will be set up this weekend. And then as far as the Lakers and Nuggets, what happened there, and I get it, all this is a few days old, but it has to be brought up because LeBron did bring up the officiating in his postgame to where he even came out and said that the Sixer-Knick game also had some controversy. And you know LeBron's on top of a lot of things, but for him to come out and blame the officiating, especially on a call that happened in the latter part of the third quarter, where D'Angelo Russell got hit in the face when the Lakers were up by 10, and for him to even bring that up when they had a 20-point lead and LeBron had an opportunity. I get it. 11 seconds on the shot clock, and I believe it was KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who fell to the floor, and LeBron had an open look for a three at 99.99 with 20 seconds left, and he missed, which set up the game-winning shot there by Jamal Murray. And LeBron can't bitch and moan about that. He's just going to have to stew inside. I understand he's trying to see if he can get an advantage as he's heading back to LA, where a Game 3 awaits there tonight at Staples, Crypto.com. But I don't want to hear it. LeBron has no business coming out to even point at the refs when you blew a 20-point lead. I get it. It's the defending champs, they're the Nuggets, etc. But a call that happened in the third quarter is not going to impact the final result of the game, unlike what you saw in New York between Philadelphia and the Knicks there. So I don't want to hear it. Do I think the Lakers, and for whatever reason, they can't beat the Nuggets. They've got swallowed, spit out, etc. by this team over the last 2 years. Do I even think they're going to win a game? Well, if they're not going to win tonight, they're going to get swept again by the Nuggets. And for all the talk there in the preseason, whether it was Anthony Davis saying that, oh yeah, we know that they've been chirping a lot and saying this and they want us and blah, blah, whatever it was that was said during training camp. Well, and not to put it all on Davis because he has had a pretty good series, although a little bit invisible there toward the end of game number 2, where I believe he only took one shot in the fourth quarter. But let's see what they're going to do here because it's do or die for them tonight as they try to get back in the series and see if they could finally beat the Nuggets here and get themselves in a position to where they could even the series going back to Denver. So that's what you have with those two big outcomes, with those series and those teams that obviously a lot of people thought that maybe they could rattle the cage and be a 7 seed, an unconventional 7 seed, where we normally get some of the dregs or the bottom feeders in the conference. And right now they're looking like that because whether it's complaining about the officials or not being able to get big stops or big baskets, what we've seen there so far from those two teams, obviously they've come up small. And then as far as two other series, which we can at least, other than the Miami Heat and Celtics, Indiana gets the equalizer there against the Bucks. Still no Giannis. We don't know what his status is going to be. But for the Pacers, who had a big performance there by Pascal Siakam, 37-16. You had a scenario where Tyrese Halliburton's brother and his family were sitting there during game 1 and were shouting the N-word toward his brother. So who knows if that's going to be some fuel to add as the series will shift to Indiana now. But if you're the Bucks, you have to wonder what's going to happen here with Giannis. And who knows, even if he's going to be playing at 85%, how effective he's going to be. I would think the Bucks are going to get one of the next two. I don't know if it's going to be tonight. Or, excuse me, I guess they play. Do they play tonight? I should know this off the top of my head. I believe it's tomorrow, and I'll take a look at that. But I don't know if they're going to be able to get game 3. I could see Indiana being all geeked up home with the series knotted at 1, and to see if they could take a leg up on the series. We're going to see what's going to be on the inside of the Milwaukee Bucks here. And really with Damian Lillard, and I talked about him a lot, especially going back to the NBA preview back in October. He was a guy that was brought here to be that extra piece, to be that guy that was going to carry them. And now he may be looking around like, oh, this is Portland East. Well, guess what? Now it's time for you to step up. Not only just that 35-point first half that you had in game 1, but now it's time to have 4 quarters to where you're going to take over. You're going to be that guy. You're going to point to that watch, Dame time, to see whether or not you're going to take the home court back from Indiana. So I think that's going to be fascinating. I don't think the Bucks are going to get out of this series, especially if Giannis is not going to come back. Although I think I may have picked them to win in 6 or 7, just based on them having at least a few players on their team who knows how to win, whether your name is Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. And understand, those are the 3, 4, and 5 guys on the team, whereas it's all about Giannis and Damian Lillard. But we're going to get to wait and see what's going to happen with that series. And then the Mavericks behind Luka Doncic and what he did in Game 2 against the Clippers, and as the scene will now move to Dallas, which hopefully for that region, or at least for that city, they'll have something to cheer about because the hockey team has gone belly up here over the first 2 games, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But for the Clippers, with Kawhi Leonard, although coming back to play in a game number 2, but James Harden invisible, even after all that chatter, 28 points in game 1, how he says, oh, he feels good and he feels great. Well, what the hell happened there when he shot 2 for 10 from 3 or whatever it is that however many points he had in that game. So you certainly have to think that the Mavericks are going to try to do what they can to see if they can go up 3-1 in this series. Now, chances are, I feel this is going to be a 7-game series. I did pick the Mavericks to win because of the uncertainty with Kawhi's health, but all I have to say is this. If the Clippers are going to get out of the series, I think, now they can win a game 4, I understand. But to me, win game 3. Start there. I understand they can lose a game 4, and that's fine, and who knows, that may even go that way. And we've seen Dallas and the Clippers go 7-game series in the past. The game that we saw in the bubble where Luka had that big-time 3. Now, the Clippers may have won in 6 that series, so correct me if I'm wrong there. But we've seen these teams go toe-to-toe against one another, and I knew this was going to be a long series. I felt the Mavericks only because I could trust Luka more, and even Kyrie to a certain extent. I could trust them more than I could trust Paul George, James Harden for sure, and even Kawhi, because Kawhi, since he's been a Clipper, he's been spotty. Those days with the Spurs were a long time ago, and even the 1 year in Toronto. So, and with the Clippers, there's going to be that big cloud over them, considering they have not been to an NBA final and have had very little success here, more so over the last decade or even the last dozen years, considering Lob City and even with Kawhi and Paul George. But they have been just a downtrodden franchise that can't seem to get out of their own way. So I would think that the series will go back to LA 2-2, but I think if the Clippers want to have any type of momentum to see if they could build, win game 3, and maybe even try to steal a game 4 before going back home. I don't think that's going to be the case, but to me, that's how I see it playing out. And then when we look at the other series that's left, OKC last night, they just blitzed right through New Orleans. Big-time performances across the board, whether your name is Chet Holmgren, whether your name, of course, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who could be the MVP this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is, although there'll be a lot of people in Denver thinking that Nikola Jokic should be the MVP again. But for the Thunder, just a tremendous performance, 124-92. New Orleans back to the drawing board, and you have to wonder, what's happening with Zion here? You saw him there on the bench. Is he going to be ready to go for a game 3, give you a little something, anything? I get it. That if he's not going to be in Zion mode full 100%, that he's not going to participate, but you got to give it a shot, my G. You just can't leave your team hanging or pull a Willis Reed where maybe you can only give them 10 minutes a game. 10 minutes is better than nothing. And you're going back home, energize the crowd, try to get them part of the mix here when it comes to seeing if you could get back in the series. So let's see what's going to take place there between the Thunder and Pelicans, and then you had the T-Wolves beating the Suns, and I don't know if this is more of an indictment on the Suns, or is it the T-Wolves playing at home and the performances that they've gotten from their players, in particular, Jalen McDaniels with 25 points, so you didn't even have to worry about Anthony Edwards having that 33-point game as he did in Game 1, or Karl Anthony Towns having a big-time performance. When Jaden McDaniels is going to score 25, and is going to, in essence, cruise a victory. I know they won, 105-93 or 105-98? The Suns, I tell you, they are a team, I don't want to say it's a disarray, but Kevin Durant did not have a good game there against the T-Wolves in Game 2. Devin Booker is always hot and cold. Bradley Beal, you can't 100% trust. We know that this team does not have a lot of depth, a bench, other scoring, other players that you could turn to contribute, and maybe they'll get that at home because generally those players that for whatever the reason can't seem to get big buckets, can't seem to make big plays on the road, they could certainly do it when they have some home cooking and in the friendly confines of their own building. But Durant, and I don't want to make this about a KD legacy thing at this juncture, who knows, maybe they'll turn it around and when we get back on Monday, the series will be tied at 2, but all I have to say is this: if the Suns don't get going here in a Game 3, they may lose in 5. And I thought that this would be at least a 6-game series. I thought that the T-Wolves, maybe even 7, I can't even recall what I thought about when I had prognosticated or was discussing about where this series would go as far as who would win. I did pick the T-Wolves to win. But for the Suns, this experiment here with Matt Ishbia bringing in Kevin Durant has not gone well. That's all there is to it. And again, I'm not going to get into a KD legacy thing. If he performs great in these next 2 games and they bring him back to a 2-2, or even if they're down 3-1, but we'll talk more about it then. But right now, it's not looking good for the Suns. That's all there is to it. So let's see. That's what we have in the NBA. It is certainly on and popping. It's percolating here a little bit, especially where you have the 3 series that are tied at 1. More so Miami and Boston, because nobody thought that the Celtics would be in a street fight, tied at 1, going back to Miami, and the unknown of how the series or where the series is going to go. I tell you, this is why the playoffs, and good for the early rounds, because you thought this was going to be a lot of 4 and 5 game series, considering how it started, but now it's changed a little bit, so we'll certainly be on top of that. Besides that, nothing else to really discuss there when it comes to the association. No other, key injuries and things of that nature, because I want to turn my attention to the NHL, because as I mentioned a little while ago, when it comes to teams that play in Dallas, the Stars, they're certainly not shining. Actually, they are flickering right now, and maybe I will pivot. I'll see if there's any news and notes with the NBA as we move it along here. But as I lace up my skates and turn my attention to the NHL, the Stars, all I can say is this. Now they got to go to Sin City against the defending champs to see whether or not they're going to be part of this postseason any further than this first round. Because dating back to game 1, where it started there on Monday night, you had Mark Stone, who obviously is a big part of that team, a guy that was out since February with a lacerated spleen. And for him to come back just, a minute 23 into the opening period of game 1 to score a power play goal, that seemed to be what the Golden Knights needed as they took off. Now, granted, it was a high-scoring first period, 3-2, but they were able to hang on there and win a game 1 to where all the momentum was now on the Golden Knights side, and the Stars needed the big-time performance last night, and they haven't been able to score. That's what it is. When you don't have your big guys being able to be at the forefront of what they've done throughout the whole regular season, and then for last night to only score 1 goal, they lose 3-1. The Golden Knights got an empty netter there to cap it off to take the series back to Sin City, where the defending champs now maybe could smell it, could taste it. Can the Stars get back in this series? Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if they even go back to Dallas, even at 2. But Vegas, as we know, that is a team, an expansion team. It's not going to be the Raiders or even the A's somewhere down the road. This is Vegas's team. And on the heels of what happened last year, last spring into the summer, winning a cup, and now that the fan base is going to be rabid, and they're going to be pumped and ready to go to see whether or not they could put the proverbial foot on the neck to get a 3-0 series lead and maybe even, dare I say, a sweep. And remember last year, the Golden Knights had a 3-0 series lead against the Stars in the conference finals before the Stars made a little bit of hay, and although they lost in 6, but they did come back. And this is why I think Dallas is not out of the series yet. But when you have to go play in that environment, and I'm not trying to make out the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas as the old Spectrum in Philadelphia or the old Montreal Forum, but that is going to be a buzzsaw and a bee's nest for the Stars to go in there. And despite the fact that they've had some long postseason runs over the years, making it to a cup final, I get it during the pandemic in 2020, and then last year to a conference final, but still, this is going to be tough sledding for them. That's all there is to it. So for the Stars, let's see whether or not they're going to have it in them to not only get back in the series, but even get back to Dallas, even at 2. And give it up for Logan Thompson, a guy who a lot of people are unfamiliar with, to be the netminder for the Golden Knights. Has played superbly here, making big stops, and also not being able to get the Stars on track there. And I get it that they opened up with the scoring with Jason Robertson and a guy who did score in game 1, but where Jamie Benn and guys like that have just been absent and not been able to step up here, you have to wonder whether or not the Stars are going to be in the series come game 3 and beyond. And it's all right in front of them, but it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. Then you had last night. I'll stick with last night in particular because you had some fascinating games. Also in the East with Toronto and Boston. Now, Toronto did get the equalizer early in the week against the Bruins, which was good for them because with Toronto, we know that they've been star-crossed here, even with a first-round series last year, victory over Tampa. But they were able to get a big win in Boston. And then last night, the scene shifted to Toronto where it was back and forth. And even with the Maple Leafs getting an early lead and then the Bruins overtaking them, but then the Bruins, in typical fashion, when you have a guy like Brad Marchand, who is a little water bug, the guy's a pest. He's a guy that you hate to have on your team, but you would just love to have on your team. And all he does is score big-time goals. Not only did he get the tie-breaking goal there more than halfway through the third period, but he got the late empty netter, and I get it was a power play for the Maple Leafs, so they had to pull the goalie to get the extra attacker, etc. Or excuse me, it was the other way around because the Bruins had a power play, but they had no choice but to do that. And Marchand, although it was an empty netter, but it was a power play goal for the Bruins, as weird as that sounds. But for the Bruins, this is a big series for them, as we talked about earlier in the week on the podcast, and even dating back to last year after that first round disaster against the Panthers. But now Toronto, now down 2-1. Let's see if they can get the equalizer there, which I believe would be Friday night. And Jim Montgomery, the coach, I don't know why he tried to fiddle around with the starting goalie where Jeremy Swayman had a great game one, and then he went to Linus Ullmark in game two for whatever the reason. And not to put it all on Ullmark, but there was no need to tinker with that, so he put Swayman back in net, and what happens? They win the game. So I teased at the opening, for those listening on Apple, Spotify, or whichever podcast platform you listen to, my opening was, will Linus Ullmark be in net for game four as a joke, tongue-in-cheek, because of what Jim Montgomery, the coach, did by putting in Ullmark in game two for what reason? I don't know, but I'm sure he's going to stick with Swayman here as the Maple Leafs now are in a 2-1 hole. And then last night, a wild game in Edmonton to where the Kings, an early overtime goal by Anze Kopitar, back and forth there, a bunch of lead changes between the Kings and Oilers. And the Kings and Oilers, they've had these type of games before. I think back to last year, I believe the Kings won in double overtime in game number 2, if I'm not mistaken, by the same score, 5-4. And now as the series will go to LA for the next 2 days, and if you recall last year, the Kings took a 2-1 series lead before Edmonton evened the series. So let's see if we're going to have the same type of blueprint moving forward with these two teams. Edmonton, we know, power play lethal. They can score with the best of them, but their defense and goaltending is a little spotty. And you saw that there last night. Even though they had to come from behind, they tied the game there midway through or past the midway point of the third period before Anze Kopitar, the longtime LA King and two-time Stanley Cup champ, was able to ice it in order for the Kings to even the series to go back to LA tied at 1. And Rangers Capitals, what can I say there? The Capitals, they look like they're going to be walking the plank here, and I'd be surprised if they get a game. Maybe somehow, some way, they will eke out a victory here, and if they're going to do it, they might as well do it tonight, because if not, it's going to be a sweep for the Rangers. And I get it, you had that chippiness there in game 2 between TJ Oshie and Artemi Panarin. And I know when Panarin had that hit on Oshie, and that was a good hit. But boy, if this was, I know, here I am getting on the soapbox, 30, 40 years ago, somebody would have taken a run at Panarin, and then it would have been an ensuing brawl, which I would have loved. You want to send the message. Panarin, as we know, he can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. And his next fight in the NHL will probably be his first. And I'm sure maybe along the way he's gotten a fighting major dating back to his early days in his career. But still, Panarin is not a guy that is going to drop the gloves, even if his life depended on it. But for the Rangers, they're going to cruise, I think, to a sweep here. And then do I really have to unpack what happened there in game number 2, Carolina, with the Islanders and Hurricanes? I'll spend a quick minute on this. This is a movie that the Islander fans have seen, similar to what I talked about with the Celtics, but in a different sense. The Islanders, for whatever the reason, they cannot hold a third period lead. They've blown so many third period leads, whether it was with Lane Lambert as coach, or even Patrick Roy, and hand raised high in the air. I witnessed one of those games. If you haven't seen the vlog, check it out, Kicked in the Groin, the NHL Outdoor Series game, which I posted right here on YouTube. If you haven't checked it out, please do. But for the Islanders to blow another third period lead at a 3-1 lead, Then it was 3-2 before. They tied the game at 3-3, past the halfway point, and then 9 seconds later, they took the lead where it just imploded right in front of the Islanders' eyes. Up 3-0, 3-1, and then before you know it, blink of an eye, was 4-3, and then they tacked on an empty net goal at the end where the Hurricanes won 5-3. I mean, seriously? This is what it's come down to. For the Islanders, if they would have gotten that game, at least it would have been an interesting series. So what? The Islanders win the night in a game 3, similar to what they did last spring. Am I supposed to get geeked up and jump up and down and think, all right, now we're back in the series? I've seen this movie before. And that's the theme here. Watching these same movies with my teams. Oh, I tell you, it is just aggravating. It's annoying. It's just frustrating. It's everything. And maybe I expect the Islanders to come out flying tonight. Maybe they'll eke out a 3-2 win or 4-3 win. Who knows? But the Islanders aren't going to win this series. I mean, who are we kidding here? Their chance to win the series was Monday night. And even if they would have won that game, to me, they still would have lost. All right, they would have lost in, what, 6 games? And I even mentioned that last week when we talked about these series. Can the Islanders win 2 games in a series? And not that means anything, because if you only win 2, you're not going to win the series. But last year they lost in 5, so maybe they lose in 6 this year. Chances are they're going to lose in 5 based on what you saw there Monday night. So that disaster, I tell you. And then give it up for the Panthers. They won a big Game 2 against Tampa where they had a 2-0 lead, and then they got 2 goals there from their top guns there, Braden Point, and it wasn't Kucherov who got the second goal, but they tied the game there at 2, and then it went into overtime, and I thought to myself, if Florida doesn't get this game and Tampa somehow wins this game, this is going to be demoralizing for this Panther team. And I get it. You can look back to last year. They were down 3-1 to the Bruins, and they went all the way to a cup. Understood. I get it. But they are the Lightning. The Lightning are the big brother in that state. And if they would have came away with that victory, 3-2, there would have been a lot of concerns and doubts in that locker room about whether or not they could beat this Lightning team, especially when the money's on the line. And Johnny on the spot. This guy I've talked about several times over the years, and even just the other day, Carter Verghese. I don't know what this guy has in his stick come overtime, but he was the one again. Whether it was Game 7 against the Bruins last year, whether it was Game 6 against Washington the year before that, or excuse me, it was Game 4 when they were down 2-1 against Washington. This guy has a knack for game-winning goals and overtime goals for that matter. Gets the game winner in overtime. Panthers go up 2-0 as they shift up north to the Panhandle. And can the Lightning come back and tie the series? I think they can. I don't know if they will. This Lightning team, it seems to be not a shell of its old self, and it's not the same Lightning team. You could just see it. Yes, they do have the big-time players. Yes, they do have the pedigree, the DNA, etc. But you could just tell that there's something just a little bit off. And who knows? Watch them come back, tie the series, and the next thing you know, it's a best of 3. But if this is going to put any gas in the Panthers' tank, and I think it may, now who knows? It's tough for them to win in that building up in Tampa, but if they're going to have any gumption, any guts, I think they're going to win one of these next 2. Which one? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be Game 3, maybe Game 4, but we'll wait to see what's going to happen there. And then Colorado-Winnipeg, I know that the Avalanche, I was going to say Hurricanes, the Avalanche, they were able to withstand a scenario where they were down 2-1 and then 6 minutes, a 6-minute stretch in the second period where they got 3 goals and they went on to win 5-2. So the Avalanche, I think, can now be in a good position to take over the home ice, which they have, but maybe even go back to Winnipeg 3-1 in the series. And think about it, Connor Hellebuyck, who gave up 6 goals in Game 1 and then 5 here in Game 2, who knows? Maybe they found an answer there to know that if they could continue to pepper Hellebuyck, they've been able to score goals on him. And that's not going to bode well for Winnipeg here because they're going to have to win one of the next 2. I don't think if they go down 3-1 that they'll win the series. So they got to get a split here, if anything, if they want to be in this series or even advance. And then you have the Canucks give it up for the Predators. They get the equalizer. They led 3-0 and in the first period, or I believe they did score 3 goals, and they cruised to a 4-1 victory. So now the Predators, let's see when they go down to Smashville against the Canucks, who had a big-time regular season, competed there for the 1 seed in the conference. We know that the Stars overtook them, but now let's see if the Predators could come out and get a game here, maybe a Game 3 to really put some pressure on the Canucks to see whether or not they're made and built to win a first-round series. So that one is in question. Do I think the Canucks will win one of the next 2? I'm going to go and say no. Now, watch them go out and have a rocking chair 5-2 type game. Because Vancouver, obviously, I haven't watched them closely. They play out on the West Coast. I'm not watching a lot of Vancouver Canuck hockey. I could honestly say that, hand raised high in the air. But when we look at what they've done throughout the course of the regular season, and I want to say based on that they will go ahead and get a split. And to me, if they don't get game 3, I don't know if they're going to get game 4. And that's how I look at it. They have to get themselves back in the series and win a game 3. And you know what? I think they can win that game 3. Put it this way. I think they could win a game 3. Because, of course, they can win a game 3 just like they could win a game 4, game 5, etc. But I don't know. That crowd, small building, they call it Smashville for a reason. I get it that the Predators, they're a 7 seed. It's not as if they're a formidable team or that cup team that when they faced the Penguins, 6-7 years ago. I understand it's not that team, but I wonder whether or not the Canucks, I don't have enough trust and faith in them to see if they could gut out a game here on the road. And we're going to find that out. So watch them prove me wrong. But something tells me that Nashville, maybe they're going to be on a bit of a magic carpet ride. So I'll have to wait and see what's going to happen there. And that's what you have with the series there in the NHL, as you got some series there that has some intrigue. Let's see if Toronto could come back against Boston, whether or not Tampa could get back on the beam. Forget about Washington, the Rangers, Islanders, Carolina. Dallas is the big story right now in the NHL, as we know. Winnipeg, can they get back in this series? And LA-Edmonton is even at 1. So typical NHL, unpredictable, and a lot of interesting storylines as we head into the weekend here. And a couple of news and notes. The San Jose Sharks fired David Quinn, their coach. Not all his fault, but he's going to be the fall guy, so he gets axed. And then Lindy Ruff, the one-time Devil coach and obviously the old Buffalo Sabre, once Sabre coach of yesteryear, gets brought back to Buffalo, Western New York. They haven't made the playoffs in a baker's dozen years. Think about that. 13 years they haven't made the postseason. So they bring back one of their old players. Let's see if they can turn it around and get themselves back on the beam to see if they could rally the troops, get themselves together. Because, man, 13-year drought, that's the Jets when you think about it. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010. So talk about that contrast between New York teams and different sports who haven't made the postseason. Let's see if Lindy Ruff could do so as they tweak their team and organization here throughout the course of the spring and summer. Now let me turn my attention. I'm going to go NFL draft because baseball right now, there really isn't much to get into. And obviously the draft is on everybody's minds and eyes. And I'm sure there are so many people that are geeked up to see how this is all going to unfold tonight. So the draft, to me, I think it's going to start at 3. We know that the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams, number 1. And I would think that the Commanders are going to take Jaden Daniels, number 2. Now, will they take Drake May, North Carolina kid, not too far, or played at North Carolina, not far? Maybe they had a lot of their scouts and a lot of their front office have a good look at May. I don't know if they want to go down that route again of a North Carolina quarterback, considering Sam Howell, they let go of him based on what they saw here over the course of the last 2 years. So that's why I feel they'll pick Daniels over May. But this is where it could shift because the Patriots are picking at 3 and they do need a quarterback. But will they trade down and have a team move up to where maybe they could get their quarterback at that spot? Now, there are rumors that the Giants may move up and they're currently at 6. Would they trade with New England to see if they could get that quarterback? Now, granted, whomever it is that they have their eyes on, the Patriots, that is, if they do have their eye on Drake May, then of course they're going to draft him. But if for whatever the reason, they can work out a deal to where May will be there at 6, or maybe somebody else that they have in mind, I don't know. And chances are, if the Giants, I don't know if they have May set in their sights. To me, that would be a bad move if you're Joe Shane, Brian Daboll and company. To me, you're bringing in another ACC quarterback into the fold, similar to what you did with Daniel Jones, and then now you're going to bring in a North Carolina guy? That's not going to work if you ask me. But let's just say if they have somebody else, maybe they have J.J. McCarthy on the top of their draft board. So where if they're going to take McCarthy, then you know at 6, you're going to see Drake May there. Because with Arizona, they're not going to draft a quarterback. They have Kyler Murray and they need a receiver. And at 5, with the Chargers, they have Justin Herbert in the fold, so you know they're not going to draft a quarterback. So if May could be there at 6, and for whatever the reason the Giants have McCarthy or maybe even Michael Penix or who knows, Bo Nix, if they have a shot or if they love those guys that much, then the Patriots are going to be Gucci because they'll have May sitting at 6. On top of that, they're going to have a scenario where they're going to take a surplus of draft picks from the Giants and they're going to make out like fat rats. Is that going to happen? Who knows? I don't know. That's just speculation on my part, but that's where the draft at 3 is going to shift here. Because if the Giants are going to look to move up, or any other team for that matter, could look to move up, it could be any one of those teams. Now, you know it's not going to be the 4 or 5 team. I get that. I don't know if Atlanta is going to think to move up, and they're, I believe, at 9 at this current juncture. I'm looking at the other teams below them as I pull up the draft here and the positioning. Tennessee at 7, they're not going to draft a quarterback, as we know. The Bears are at 9. Would they even think to move up a little bit, considering that they already had the number 1 pick overall? I think they'll probably stay put. Who knows with the Jets at 10? Brock Bowers, I know a lot of the talk is maybe bringing in the Georgia tight end, which I think would be great, but they need more offensive line help because their offensive line is old. They brought in a lot of those guys, whether it was Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Morgan Moses. Those guys aren't 24, 25, 26 years old, getting ready to hit their prime. Those guys are pretty much stopgaps for Aaron Rodgers here in the season to where they're going to need to keep him upright, as we saw 4 plays into the season last year. So who knows? Does Joe Douglas, the GM, is he going to go offensive lineman, or is he going to bring in another weapon for Aaron Rodgers to see whether or not they could just outscore everybody and hope and pray that Rodgers stays healthy throughout the course of 17 games? And then you also have the Vikings, who may look to move up. They have the 11th spot right now. Remember, they traded earlier in the spring with the Houston Texans to get 2 picks to see whether or not that they could maybe package that to move up in the draft to maybe themselves get J.J. McCarthy. Who knows if that's a deal where they may look to the Patriots at number 3 to say, hey, we'll give you our 2 picks and whatever else to get that number 3 spot. But again, do the Patriots have a quarterback in mind? You would think they do. I mean, it's not as if they could bring up a guy out of the scrap heap now because everybody's rosters, especially when it comes to backup quarterbacks, they're already set. So I don't know what you're going to do there unless they have a rabbit that they're going to pull out of their hat as far as trading for a quarterback that some team is just looking to give up on. But at this juncture of the offseason, that's not going to be the case. Denver, they need to draft a quarterback. Who knows what's going to happen there? Will they move up too? Chances are that may not be the case. Then you have the Raiders, Saints, Colts there in the middle, followed by the Seahawks, 16. And then obviously from that point on, you're probably going to have a lot of trades, people jockeying for position, where they're going to trade from the second round into the first or trade out of the first round into the second. That is obviously unpredictable. And that's why the mock drafts, to me, they are a non-issue. And I get it. This is what people do. The Mel Kipers of the world, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the guys like that, Ian Rappaport's. Of course they're going to do that. A, it's fun. B, it's this time of year. You know that these teams, these writers, these guys are going to go ahead, draft geeks. They're going to have their mock drafts, etc. But after you get to about the 2nd or 3rd pick, and even in this draft, once you get to 3, it's a toss-up. It's like trying to predict who's going to win the NCAA tournament by getting all the picks right. It's impossible. So when you get down to the teens and beyond, obviously it's a crapshoot. Now, when you get to 20, my beloved Steelers, they could go in a multitude of directions. I would say offensive line, get another bookend for Broderick Jones, or even better yet, a center. I know that's one of the needs there. Mel Kiper has pointed out. And I don't know what top center is going to come out of college right now. Is there a Marquise Pouncey a la 2010 where you could just put him right there? They let go of Mason Cole earlier this offseason, so they're going to need a center. But offensive line is fine. Even defensive line they need. Cameron Hayward's getting old. They don't really have a solid defensive line. I know the Larry Ogunjibis of the world, very good player. And guys like that who could be stopgaps and could do well on a defensive line, but they don't have that guy that could plug in and pretty much fit the bill for the perennial All-Pro and now the Walter Payton Man of the Year. You're not going to worry about linebacker. You could also use another corner. They solidified their secondary a little bit. Their linebackers are straight. Maybe you draft another wide receiver with the loss of Deontay Johnson. I know you have George Pickens there, and Freiermuth is your tight end. And you do have a couple other guys. You could Calvin Austin III. I know he's more of a return guy, but maybe a wide receiver you could look at. So the Steelers have a multitude of options that they could take a 30,000-foot view on. To me, if they're going to go with any one of those type of positions, that's fine with me. Then you have, Dolphins, Eagles, the 23rd pick, which was the Texans pick there from Minnesota. And first round, that's where you're going to go. I don't have a mock draft, as you guys and gals know. I mentioned that on Monday's pod. So for me to really massage and get into all these picks, come on, who are we kidding here? But it all tips off tonight in Detroit. I know it's going to be crazy there. You're going to see hundreds of thousands of people just lined up. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. Hopefully it's nice there. It's not raining, as you've seen. I believe in Nashville a few years ago, it was pouring. Maybe not pouring, but it was raining. Put a damper on things. So that's what you have with the draft. I'm not going to get into projecting the second and third rounds there tomorrow night, as well as the 4 through 7 sleepers, this guy, that guy. But we all know that with the first round, it's going to be quarterback heavy. You got the 3 guys there in Williams, Daniels, and Drake May. Also throw in Michael Penix Jr., also throw in J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. So that's 6 guys that could go here in the opening round. You have a bunch of receivers, as we know, the Malik Neighbors of the world, the Marvin Harrisons, Brock Bowers, I get he's the tight end, Brian Thomas, the other kid from Texas who ran a 4.240 in the combine. So you have 6 targets that you could choose from there. So that's 12 out of the 32 that's going to be drafted, as well as some offensive linemen, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, a few others that we could go on down the list. So it is really offensive heavy here in this first round. I know you got a couple of corners. Don't really have a bunch of pass rushers coming out, but let's see. It's going to be interesting, and I know that the draft, it's more of an event. It's sitting around. You get so many different angles between the picks. Oh, what should they do here? What can we do here? And you watch all the packages of the highlights, and they're only going to show the good stuff where everybody goes ooh and ah over the catches and the throws and the sacks and the tackles. I mean, please, those packages, you could put a package of me here talking about podcasts and make it pretty. And I know that there's probably been a day or two where I haven't been at my best, which I always try to be at my full 100, but I'm sure you could go back in the archives and be like, oh, JAYREELZ, that wasn't your best. Obviously, that's not going to be part of my highlight, just being transparent and accountable with you guys and gals. But that's what we had there with tonight. We'll certainly be on top of that come Monday and see how the draft unfolds. And of course, check the YouTube channel as always. Check right here for any of the latest with trades and things of that nature. As you know, I'll be on top of that, especially first round, more so the first round than the second and third and beyond. And now as I turn my attention to baseball, I'll wrap it up here. Do I really need to talk about Hunter Wendelstedt? How on Monday, after 4 pitches, he threw out Aaron Boone? Do I really need to? I mean, seriously, that's what baseball's come to right at this moment? And Boone, I'm not trying to make him out to be an angel. The guy gets thrown out and with his stupid gestures and mocking the umpires, etc. But that was uncalled for Hunter Wendelstedt to throw him out when you had a guy that was in the stands to the right of the dugout yelling at Wendelstedt to where he tossed Aaron Boone. Somebody must have pissed in his Cheerios that morning, and I'd hate to be blunt about it, but that's a fact. But that was just a terrible job by Wendelstedt to throw out Aaron Boone in that case. And let's call it as we see it. I know the Yankees bounced back with 2 wins against the A's, but what is the Yankee record right now? I think they're 17-8, and 4 of those 8 losses have been shutouts, and won by the Athletics there on Monday, and 4 times already, and we're not even out of the month of April. So I know Aaron Judge hasn't hit, and Giancarlo Stanton's been up and down, and I know Rizzo's hit some home runs. Gleyber Torres has not been good. It's all been Juan Soto. But the Yankees, although they've been in first place and they've done well, but they haven't really hit the way you've liked to. Now, they've gotten some big hits in big spots thanks to Soto and have gotten some power. But other than that, and I understand, I'm not trying to throw cold water, and I get people saying, oh, here goes JAYREELZ on the Yankees. But those are the facts. Shut out 4 times already, and you got shut out by the Rays and Athletics. I mean, come on. They're not world beaters by any means. So when we take a look at what's happening with baseball, I know that the Orioles are neck and neck there with the Yankees, as we talked about there on Monday. Guardians, they are playing baseball that I've been shocked. 17-7. They're currently playing right now as we speak. Have a 5-0 lead over the Red Sox as the afternoon games are already been underway. The AL West is a disaster, including the Astros. 7-18. They are in last place, and if it wasn't for the White Sox and the Marlins, they have the third worst record in Major League Baseball. Oh, you got to throw in the Rockies. So that is some company that the Astro fan does not want to keep, and this could be a year where things do not click. And I get it that they're only 6 in the loss behind the Rangers for first place. So it's not as if the Rangers are running away with it, but not a good start for them. I know the Mets salvaged their series out in San Francisco after 2 bad losses there by the Bay against the Giants as they come back home. And then the Pirates, who are they playing right now? They're playing the Brewers, and I believe they're playing, is this the end of a series or the start of a 4-game series? That I got to look at. In fact, let me look at the schedule right now to see what we got cooking here for the weekend. Milwaukee and Pittsburgh. No, this is actually the finale of a series because the Pirates will go out to San Francisco, and that's a bad job on my part. Let's see what the Brewers and Pirates have done here to this point because that was a big series. And yes, I did mention that on Monday, come to think of it. Pirates, right now, this is the rubber game because the Pirates won 2-1 on Tuesday and then 3-2 yesterday. The victors were the Brew Crew. So, as a matter of fact, let me take that back one notch. Pirates have won 2 of the first 3. Now, they could get 3 out of 4, which would be good for them. So, let's see if they could do so. They are currently tied at 3, top of the 5th. I get it. By the time you listen to this over the weekend, it'll be moot if you're not going to listen to this right away. Shout out to my guys, Nike, John Guerrero, who are always on top of it. Even my other guy, James Douglas, got to give him a shout out too. So, for Major League Baseball here in the weekend, as far as the schedule goes, your matchups, any 4-game series, let me start off there because you know JAYREELZ will overlook that. Let's see. Dodgers are in Toronto. Interesting series there. For nostalgic sake, Cubs at Red Sox. The Guardians are playing Guardians are playing the Braves. So that's an interesting series there to see where they stack up against the Bravos down in the ATL. You have Kansas City, Detroit. All right, only because both of those teams are playing pretty well. Philly at San Diego, Pittsburgh at San Francisco, and Arizona at Seattle. The other games, come on, Oakland at Baltimore, Cincinnati at Texas. Not going to get too crazy about that. And as far as 4-game series, I mentioned Kansas City, Detroit. That is not a 4-game set. Let me look here before I move on. No 4-game series to speak of as I look at the schedule here, so I'm in the clear there. Let me look Chicago. Nope, because Minnesota is on the road at the Angels. That's what you have with baseball, people. I don't know what else to chime in or add in on. Let me just take a quick look. Oh, wow. MLB's bringing back Players Weekend in August. You got the names in the back of the jerseys. All right, big whoop there. Yankees LeMahieu shut down at least a week with that foot injury. I'm sure you got to be sick if you're a Yankee fan, again, with all of the health issues that you've had. Garrett Cole, very quiet there. Remember, he threw, last Monday, I believe it was, and you haven't heard anything since. I don't know if they're just keeping it mum just to kind of lay low until they get a better prognosis when it comes to his elbow. So nothing heard from there. That's what you have, people. That is it. Nothing really to discuss as far as golf, tennis. I'm not going to get into Tiger and Rory getting bonuses from the PGA. Really, as if they need more money. Well, good for them. That's fantastic. I don't know what's happening in UFC after UFC 300 a couple weeks ago. No boxing to really speak of. Tennis, you're not going to have the French Open until the end of the month. So that's what I got. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, people. Carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review. Hit me up on my social media accounts, YouTube, at JAYREELZ. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, share it with your friends, family, frenemies, foes, the sports fan, or even someone who likes to watch some lifestyle vlogs. I have plenty cooking. Got something on deck. Hopefully I'll get that up to you on Sunday, which I'm trying to consistently post every Sunday with the lifestyle stuff. And I got some other news. I'm going to do a live stream. Haven't targeted it yet. I think I will announce it on Monday. I got you suspenseful. Pins and needles. Yes. A live stream is coming next week. I haven't targeted the date yet, but be on the lookout for that. It's probably going to be on Instagram. Not probably, definitely on Instagram. Can't really do it on YouTube at the present moment, so stay tuned for that. Check all my social media feeds and YouTube for the latest when it comes to what that live stream is going to be or when it's going to be and what time. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, of course, on YouTube at JAYREELZ, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number, the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to talk about, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA since birth. This is why I've become a full-time content creator, people, because to pivot, to make this move at this point is to give 100% into this endeavor. I want to take it to places unknown for an independent, just yours truly, one-man operation like myself. I'm going to continue to deliver the fire, passion, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, directed, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.